Okay, seems we're live. No intros, no music, no nothing. Thank you for waiting. I hope you all understand why we're a wee bit late with the after party, because we overran a wee bit, and then obviously I had to go and take a quick break and get a rest. So this is a public video. Everybody that's involved here, every comment that you make, everything that you say is going to be available for people to see in the future, but they have to have the link. It's not going to appear on anyone's channel, and it's not going to be publicly advertised or listed anywhere. It's an unlisted link. But that said, if people have the link, they can still watch the content. So we all have to keep our decorum and be polite and everything. I'm using this as a space to relax a wee bit after 3 hours of the first ever OSWAs, which I very much enjoyed. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined behind the scenes by other folk who wanted to come along and hang out as well. So I'm going to just jump in, grab the chat, because this is all about feedback from you. I'm going to try and interact with the chat as much as I can. So as my guests chat amongst themselves and speak to you, we'll all kind of be monitoring the chat. This is a kind of debrief, a questions and answers, a feedback session, whatever you want to call it. For me, it's about having beer and a pizza, but I'll try and do that with the microphone muted, don't worry. Okay, let's bring in my sidekick, Ralphie, who's pleased. The man in the Irish Sea, the man in the bothy somewhere in the Irish Sea is pleased with how things went. Here to relax a wee bit, Ralphie, yes?
Sidekick alert, here I am, on cue.
Fantastic.
I was a bit concerned, actually, because it's very windy out and there's a lot of mature trees around the bothy. So I'm relying on copper wires suspended from telegraph poles that are constantly getting brushed by these trees. However, I've recently upgraded my internet provider and upgraded my computer. And I must say, the quality of the image, I'm quite happy with this. I suspect I'm catching up with modern technology a wee bit from the bothy.
Well, absolutely. It's nice to bring you into the 21st century and be able to have you participating fairly regularly in live streams. And your internet is holding up absolutely fine. Well, we bring in our other guests who's going to help us out with the questions in the chat tonight. We've got Andy from Maltbox. Great to see you. We've got Sheila from Mexico. Well, from Washington, I suppose, I guess, but Mexico today. We've got the Whiskey Novice Jim, and we've got fantastic. I can't believe this. This is a nice touch. We've got Alex Bruce from Ardnamurchan hanging out for a wee bit of the after party time. Alex, I don't know how long you're able to hang out with us, my friend, but are you quite pleased? You were mentioning when we were off air there that you were quite impressed and happy how everything went and the engagement of the community and everything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was just amazing to see it. And no, I've been speaking to the team on WhatsApp because they're all over the place tonight. We've got two in Budapest, one in Aviemore, one in Ayrshire, and they're just absolutely over the moon. So thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you for hanging out with us as well. I don't know. I'm gonna ask maybe Sheila to do her very, very best. You're probably the best versed here. Sheila and Jim actually both at handling the chat. Sheila, if you can spot any questions or whatever in the chat, please by all means just go right ahead and ask. Because if I can, the more I can get you all talking, the more I get to.
The more you get to eat pizza.
I get to eat some pizza, but I will do it with the microphone off, I promise. For me personally, let me say, I think it went much better than expected. You know, from a personal perspective, when you give it so many layers of complexity, like Jim, Sheila, the guys will know what's behind the scenes. It's very, very easy to trip over yourself and you know, make something up when you're kind of running all those layers of content and things like that and graphics on screen and things. But it went very, very well. But I think the thing we achieved, Ralphie, better than anything were those themes that we were looking at, right? That idea, that concept of Renaissance, the idea of the people reminding us when we miss something and telling us, hey, you forgot this, guys. Or the other idea of kind of, you couldn't avoid it. We didn't need to labor the point too much, I think. Natural. It's not us. It's everyone. We just represent them. I don't know if I'm right in that assessment or not.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's very particular to an online situation that as we have been morphing and developing the OSWA concept, the response and the comments that we pick up online are quite challenging and making us think about things that we then have to feature and add in and consider incorporating into the OSWAs. And a very good example of that is, well, hang about, when you declare the winners, aren't the retailers going to jump their prices up? Aren't you going to get this? It's bad enough when you've got a bit of Ralphie effect, but when you have OSWA effect, is it going to be seen as an opportunity for capitalization and premiumization of existing stock in shops, because it's technically in award territory? And I think that having retailers actually come on board and put their badge into the oswa.co.uk website and say, guys, we're going to hold our prices as they stand for the rest of the year, is very pragmatic, and it's something which has simply never happened before, but the internet allows it. And it's not the only example I could mention, but I don't want to be hogging this conversation, guys.
Well, I know it's interesting, and I'm going to make the most of your time, Alex, if you don't mind. If you're willing to hang out with us, I'm going to squeeze every little bit of opinion I can out of you while you're here. You see things from a different angle. You're trying to run this balancing act between stock and getting product out there, availability. You're going through all the fights that you're going to have with your supply chain and distributors and negotiations, and you see everything from a different perspective than we do. Does it frustrate you when you see us enthusiasts online with this very kind of black and white perspective of the industry and just talking about, no, we want it natural, oh, it's too expensive, oh my goodness, we can't buy it? It must frustrate a producer. Is it difficult?
I think if I can take the last question first, I can't buy it question. That one is completely out of our hands as a producer. There are different ways of getting product to market today, far more different ways than there ever have been. You can go direct to consumer through your own website. You can have a trusted distribution, set up locally, nationally, internationally, but things will still potentially sell out, and there's nothing we as a producer can do about that. We can monitor it, we can try and balance it. So if something isn't selling in such a place, we'll move it somewhere else. But in terms of natural, of course, that's up to the producer. And I can only speak for ourselves in that, we are as a team, and we're not a big team. I mean, there's 28 of us across Adelphi and Ardnamurchan. But as a team, we're all 100% passionate about whiskey and drinking whiskey, enjoying whiskey. So why would we ever produce something that we don't like ourselves? And it's a very simple philosophy. The blending sessions that we do are completely in-house. 5 of us sit around my kitchen table every 3 months and we put the next one together. And it's as simple as that. And it doesn't pass until we all like it. So I can only speak for myself, as I said, but yes, from our point of view, the more natural, the better.
By the way, anybody's welcome while I'm eating to step forward and keep the conversation going. We've got hosts in here as well who do a very good job. Shayla and Jim, I know you do this type of thing. So just go right ahead and ask. And by the way, anybody that's in the lounge to chat tonight, I'm watching and I'll look for anybody that's typing Aquavite.
Yeah.
I'll try and catch any good, interesting comments, feedback.
So I liked Duncan Woots while you're chewing that pizza. Do you have any plans to roll the People's Choice top choices directly into next year's nominations? I thought that was interesting because there was a lot of times where I was like, I wonder if we would have nominated this instead of, maybe a different bottling, like Glen Scotia 15 instead of Glen Scotia Victoriana, what would have happened? So, kind of rolling those things in. Do you think you'll do that next year? Or? The
thing about YouTube, Sheila, as you know very well, it is not a megaphone or a soapbox or a pulpit. It's bi-directional. So the community are influencing directly on the things that we drink as well, through the comments, through direct messages, through live stream, whatever it may be. So we know that subconsciously, their recommendations and the things that they're enjoying is going to weave its way into our purchasing decisions as creators, as channel hosts. There's an inevitability that will factor in. If you talk about modifying the structure of next year's OSWAs, that Ralphie and I haven't discussed that. That is not on the table. I think we need to take our place as commentators, contributors, reviewers, whatever you want to call us, creators. And we need to step up and say, these are our recommendations. You don't need to agree with them. And you have, through a unique model, through the OSWAs model, you have the ability to feed back to us that you don't agree. But I think we need to take our place. We can't just make a fully democratic platform and just throw everything out to just asking people what they're enjoying, because it eventually gets to the point that whatever people can buy the most of wins, and then it's just a populist thing. We need it to be more about guided, informed. We need to take our place to lead the discussion, and I think that if we place the nominations first, that sets the tone. But Ralphie and I will not try to influence what those nominations are. Now, you guys, we've got 3 contributors in here. Andy, Sheila, Jim, you were allowed to do anything you wanted, right?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I think you said it yourself, Roy, to me personally. Well, you didn't just say it to me personally, you said it aloud, that this wouldn't be understood until it was finished, really.
Right.
And I agree with that. Now, here's my question to you and Ralphie. How do you think it went? Were you surprised by the outcome?
I cannot tell you how excited Ralphie and I were when we saw the data coming in. Right? When we saw, because Ralphie and I were, when we set out, we potentially knew that we would have to face some really difficult discussions or nominations or things selected by the people that Ralphie and I were uncomfortable about because we thought we weren't particularly good. We weren't comfortable evangelizing or sharing about, right? It's just, but that never happened. It was like time after time after time after time. The things that we've discovered in the glass. Here's Scott I'm going to bring in Scott. He's just dropped in as well. Nice to welcome you, Scott. Good to have you, buddy.
I was hoping you're still going.
Yeah, we absolutely are. We've only been going a few minutes, just 12 minutes. We're running very late. So the things that we're discovering in our glass, the things that we are enjoying, it's not an isolated experience that we're having in our bothy, in our spare room in our house, like here. The things that we're experiencing are resonated throughout the community, and we're not alone in discovering this greater engagement and greater quality of experience when things are presented with. Excuse me, that's the pizza coming back. When things are presented with a cannier hand. So it's when Ralphie and I saw these results coming through, I mean, some of them were very surprising, some of them were really interesting, right? But we were excited because we were like, oh my goodness, this is actually in a lot of ways better than what we could have expected. Ralphie, how many times did we need to edit any of that information we shared tonight?
Zero. We didn't have to interfere at all. But the reason for that, Roy, is because we spent a lot of time at the beginning really fine-tuning and examining and overviewing the model that the OSWAs has become. And as it was progressing in development, it would morph slightly depending on the feedback that we were getting and what we were observing online. Right. And I think that quite important, and the reason that I approached you originally to discuss this is timing. Because
I thought it was because you admired my palate, my whiskey assessing skills. I'm mistaken. Sorry, it was timing. Continue, please.
Yes. What I particularly admire, Roy, is apart from your fine palate and experience and your tactfulness, where I'm not quite as tactful. So we're balancing each other off quite nicely, I think, in that respect. But everybody here has experience of whiskey online. And it's got to, I mean, I remember back in 2009, it was dial-up. I was dialing up. And Alec, you'll probably remember when I suddenly appeared at that table at Air Whiskey Show with my little cigarette packet camera stuck in the end of the tripod and started quizzing you about a few bits and pieces. It's hard to believe that is that's 10 years ago.
I still wake up in a cold sweat.
Do you? You and me both. You were far kinder in your reception than others. Some folk just looked at me and thought, "Who the hell is this beep?" I mean, I'm kid you not. Some people saying, "Do you have permission to record here?" To which I respond, "Well, actually, yes, I do," and that kind of shut them down. But this was the very early days when nobody knew what the online geek was, and when they were going to suddenly appear at your table. Unlike a traditional journalist, where you would have the script and the certain protocols, the onliners were coming at it from scratch. And as it's evolved over time and developed, you have this expansion and variety of whiskey engagers who I think it's something quite disparaging. We get called influencers. To a certain extent, that's true, but unfortunately, it gets overplayed as a label. But we are contributors, and that as individuals, we can see our going contribution, but we certainly needed a vehicle, something which consolidated individual contributions into something that expressed consensus, which the industry collective is going to have to be simply more aware of. And as we expected, it's the small dynamic distilleries who are focused specifically on quality and integrity, who are the first to recognize it and the first to connect with it. I'm really interested now to see how things develop next year. Without doubt, I think I'm talking on behalf of everybody, that we've had our litmus test, our trial by fire with the first OSWA broadcast, and it has been a resounding success. Absolutely. And a big thank you to you, Roy, because all the actual processing and analytics and those excellent graphics, musical graphics that you put in there to break up the sequences. I mean, that's last minute. That was never discussed at the beginning. That really popped in the 11th hour. And it's actually added to the cohesiveness very successfully of the whole experience. And it will grow next year. And next year we will expand to include online contributors who may be on Reddit, on the traditional blog, podcast. And simply the whole model allows for a lot more people to be providing towards the nominations in the categories. But apart
anybody that's watching any other channels, contributors out there on YouTube, anybody that's involved in the whiskey scene and social media outlets and blogs or whatever it may be, Ralphie are discussing, and we already have a very well hatched idea and plan how we can involve a lot more people in the future. David Swift has asked this quick question. Will we see a spread of where voters come from? How far is your reach? Let me tell you, David, as part of the YouTube analytics, we see that anyway. We are absolutely reaching everybody globally. Ask me about just when I search out merch, I send it to literally everywhere, places I have never even heard of before. Also, you would have saw Ralphie talked about the little vignettes, the graphics and things that were used to present supporting channels. That's people that contributed and channels that stepped up to say, hey, I love this. I want to be involved in the future. I'm not going to make any demands, but I want to be involved. Can I get involved? And they're already supporting channels. Tito Whiskey, he's a guy doing Spanish content in Argentina. We've had the same from the Portuguese. Some of the biggest channels in whiskey tube are Portuguese-speaking Brazilian channels. Massive audiences. They're reaching out and saying, guys, we love what you're doing. We don't go out in English. Does that exclude us? Absolutely not. You can be included as well. So there's lots of that for the future, David. Thanks for asking. I've got an awkward question to put Alex on the spot, if you don't mind, Alex. If I can, I know you're a diplomat. I know you'll get through this easily. But here's a
left yet.
Here's a wee question from, this is Whiskey Lock, who is a Whiskey Tube channel. He is a creator. Question for Alex: why do you think so many producers seem determined to use chill filtration and especially artificial colouring when it seems absurd to us enthusiasts? This is like a nice little concise stink bomb to drop at your feet, Alex.
Well, I mean, we've got to remember that, we are incredibly lucky. We are sitting here in, 2021. We've had about maybe 30 years of proper single malt category development now, and maybe 11 or 12 years of real push in single malt. And when I joined Adelphi in 2004, and single malt was pretty small still. It wasn't until the late part of that decade it really started to take off. And that is where the whole non-chill filtered natural color push came from, in my opinion anyway. When you're making a blend, you have to look at consistency of both flavor and color. And you'll never get consistency of color in thousands of casks in a blend. It will always be slightly different. So the only way to get consistency in a blend was to add color, spirit caramel, as is used. Chill filtration, of course, this is probably partly to do with the high level of tax or duty that is imposed on alcohol and particularly spirits in many countries around the world, which means that a lot of producers have to bottle at the lowest strength possible in their category, which for Scotch whisky is 40%. And anything, as we know, under 46 starts to go cloudy. In fact, we produce stuff at 48, which is pretty hazy. It just depends on the weather when you're producing it. But if you want a clear, consistent product in bulk, you have to chill filter and you have to add color. So it's really only single malt and the smaller people like ourselves and many others who have managed to get round that by producing things which aren't necessarily consistent to the eye. We can get around that.
There was also another question for Alex about a cask strength version, if there's anything in the works.
Of Ardnamurchan.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we've done, in fact, the product placement. Hey. I've been savoring this for a bit. This is the Paul Noir finish that we did. So our friends in Le Mesnil in the Champagne region, there is no such thing as a champagne cask, so we can't call it that, but it's from a Chardonnay barrel, and that is at cask strength. So we are, as we move forward into next year, there's two things we're going to do. One is we're going to make the standard batch, if you like, the AD, which has had the dates on it. We're going to make that into a uniform product. So it will become, hopefully it's already become relatively consistent. Another reason for waiting a few extra years. But you'll see less emphasis on the batch numbers and more emphasis on just it being our core staple product. That will allow us to bring more limited editions out as well, like the Paul Noir. We've got some very exciting things coming out. And this year in particular, for the future, we've started laying down some quite interesting stock, some heavily peated, some rum casks. So look, cask strength is what we're made of. I mean, Adelphi has been cask strength forever. So yes, we will definitely be going down that route.
Great.
Just while you're here, Alex, just when I know technically, well, Ardnamurchan got my vote. I'll tell you that now.
Thank you.
Well done. But when can we expect? Although it's, I suppose you would technically nearly call it. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. When can we expect to see an age statement on there?
So that's a very interesting question. I think I've probably bored certainly Roy and possibly Ralphie about this already. One of the things we're being very transparent, and so everything we do goes into the blockchain. I'm not going to bore anyone about blockchain tonight, but it's an authentic way of recording all our production, basically. So that then translates into the availability of everything that we've done to produce any particular whiskey through a QR code on the bottle. So all you do is when you buy your Ardnamurchan, you scan the QR code and it will tell you anything you want to know and more probably, including the age. Now, there are obviously some strict laws around only promoting the youngest age in Scotch whisky. And I stress the word promoting. We are not promoting any ages. We're simply telling you what's in the mix. So you can see the current ones are 5 years old. Whether or not we actually put a number on a label is a very good question. I don't want to be stuck with age statements. I don't want to have to produce an 8, a 10, a 12. I only want to release whiskey when we think it's ready at that level. So who knows? I mean, things are changing anyway, so we'll see.
It almost sounds, sorry, but that would almost sound like you're aiming at the enthusiast, which I applaud all day long, because I mean, if we have to work, if I don't care, I look to see what age it is, I'll work for it. If the whiskey's good, personally, I don't really care if there's an age statement on there anyway, but I just wanted to ask. I just thought it was.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's a combination of saying, look, if you want to see what the age is, it's here, but we're not making a great song and dance of it. We're just simply looking for when it's ready.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for taking a couple of crunchy questions. I know these are actually, the way you answered it was perfect. It gives us a lot of context and a lot of kind of perspective. But it's only difficult to answer those questions if you've got either something to hide or something that you're not encouraged or permitted to say. But if you're free to say whatever you want to say and just tell people why things are, then it's fine to say the words, because people are not stupid. They just sometimes are a wee bit misinformed. And if you give them the word, if you say the words, they have the ability to appreciate them and understand them and in the context as you've explained tonight. You mentioned it was quite interesting to talk about your development of single malt as a category over the last 30 or 40 years. That's absolutely part of it. And even when single malts came out originally, the mass market single malts were copy and paste the way that blends were presented. And guess what? They were tried to be pulled from large depths of stock for the mass market in order to provide a consistent product, much in the same vein as a blend would have been, which is a difficult thing to ask of a single malt, right? Because of the very nature, you have to have deep stocks of anything to do that. I don't know if you would agree with that, but we're certainly seeing us moving away from that now. We're quite happy to accept variations in batch to batch, vintages being different. The idea that single malt is a very organic product, liable, open to variation, I think. I want to answer Falscraft's question quickly. He's talking about, he's mentioned a couple of times about he didn't understand the OSWAs, Jim, novice. That was exactly your concept. We talked about this. I think it's going to take a wee while for people to understand what Ralphie and I have actually put together, because we use the words awards, and that's our fault. There is an award element to it, but it's not a traditional awards model. Would you say, Jim?
Yeah, 100%. You know, but as I said to you the other evening, it did prove itself. You know, the proof of the pudding was in the tasting, and I mean, now that the results are out, it all makes perfect sense. This has played out like a Tarantino movie. Sometimes I didn't know what the hell was going on, but when I got to the end, it made perfect sense. And you said it yourself, the People's Choice changed everything as well, because we knew, to say we didn't know what was going on, we had a rough idea what was going on, as in we were taking part. So we knew where people were angling. But then that all changed whenever you seen that.
Why do you think, how many times did I say thank you for your trust? Thank you for your trust.
Yeah.
Because if I spend too much time trying to sell something to you, I think it's off-putting. You know, just let's go with this thing. Let me celebrate you as a channel, as a contributor and everything. And trust me with your voice, your votes, whatever it is. Trust me with your name, your brand and everything. And Ralphie and I will try to do the very best we can with that. So I think it will develop as time goes on. I think Ralphie and I will refine it. But I think what's actually happened this evening is we've been able to prove that most of the dynamics that we guessed we could maybe achieve, we've been able to pull off, more or less, I think. That idea that we're taking our places as YouTubers, and also the idea that we give the public a chance to influence those nominations that we've put forward, but also give them free rein to feedback to us and the industry and anybody who cares what they are actually enjoying at home. So I think that was interesting. David Owen is saying he's disappointed not to see Glencadam in the top 10 distilleries. Lots of people are telling David Owen and lots of people that are talking about Glencadam to not talk about these hidden gems, because guess what? Arran was once one of these. I'm disappointed not more people are talking about Arran. And now Aaron will start to see a strain on they're going to have to manage their stocks very, very carefully going forward. And I think that the more that that's encouraged going forward, the more they leave a vacuum of empty shelves. Surely that's going to see other producers say, wait a minute, this is succeeding. There's a hunger, there's an appetite for this type of product. Let's step into that space. Glencadam have done that. Most of the Glencadam range is 100% fully natural. Absolutely, all out natural. And now, in the last 2 years, everybody's talking about Glencadam. You're right, David. It's not made it into the top 10, but it will get there. I fully agree that it will get there.
Yeah. If I could add just briefly that both Roy and I could not really have achieved this without the trust of the engagement of the wider online whiskey community, both contributors and video makers, but also the fans out there that leave their comments in the comment section under our videos. They're a very loyal bunch. They're very articulate, and I just want to give a shout out to them. There's very, very rarely an occasion where we actually have to ban somebody from our channel because of the volatility, aggression, or the nastiness of the comments. And we're realistic about this. Many people, when they leave comments, are perhaps no longer sober completely, but the civility is very encouraging. And I would conclude that just to pop this in as regards what Roy was saying earlier about as we overview now that we've had the inaugural OSWAs, what have we got to be mindful of as we move forward? And that is the potential in maybe 2 years, perhaps not next year, but in 2 years, that there will be an attempt to try and vote up certain brands. We can see it coming, but fortunately, with the algorithms that are available through the system we're using, we're already setting things in place to spot that happening.
Whiskey Lock is asking, do you think we could split bourbon and grain into two categories? I know OSWA isn't bourbon centric, but grains are getting big in their own right and should have to and shouldn't have to compete with bourbon. Thanks for the question, buddy. I have to tell you that absolutely it does need to compete. The thing is that this is the Scotch whiskey enthusiasts. This is our money, our wallet. It's the people who are Scotch centric. So if you're going to encourage them out of their Scotch comfort zone in order to explore other whiskey categories and other flavour profiles, you're probably going to need to do that looking at it from their perspective. So they're going, well, where should I go into bourbon? What kind of grain should I go into? That's the reason the categories are defined like they are. We know that rye whiskey and bourbon whiskey is a completely different drink. We know that grain and malt is a completely different drink, and in the blended category, they're squashed in together, right? We understand that this is happening, but we know our audience. Ralphie and I know our audience, and every other creator that's in here tonight and who contributed know our audience as well. And it's malt, malt, malt. We reached out to creators that are active in other categories. Jim Ingram being a perfect example of that, who loves to keep an eye on Irish whiskies and that category as well. So, but as long as somebody had a footing in Scotch, they were able to come in and contribute to this thing. And that's why it's the OSWAs, the Online Scotch Whisky Awards, from the Scotch whisky loving community. That's why the categories look a wee bit clumsy through the framing of a traditional award ceremony. But if you look at it through the framing of a Scotch whisky enthusiast, they start to make a wee bit more sense. Would you agree, Scott, over at Scotch Test Dummies there in Kansas? You guys made the transition from being a Scotch malt channel to going out to doing world whiskies and then bourbon and everything now, right? They're not the same drink, but you went through that journey. You did that transition, right?
Yes, yeah, and originally, early on, we were just Scotch, hence the name, the Scotch Test Dummies. And then after a while, we realized, hey, we're in the States. There's all these bourbons and stuff around us, and we need to get into those as well. But now, and like most of us tuning in here, we've had whiskey from Japan, Australia, Taiwan, Canada, Mexico. There's whiskey being made all over the world. and darn good whiskey at that. And it surprises me still, though, when you run into people that, they only drink bourbon or they only drink scotch and they don't want to venture out and try any of these other regions. And they're missing out, on a lot of good stuff.
Absolutely. And even if they're not missing out on the good stuff, Scott, even if they decide, oh, well, that bourbon was quite tasty, that rye was quite different, I think I'll go back to Scotch. At least then they've taken the step and it's expanded their flavour profiles, their flavour, their library of flavours, and it at least reassured them that they're in the right place of the whiskey that they're enjoying, right? I think it helps you enjoy your Scotch or whatever it is that you enjoy if you can contrast it with experimenting and trying other things. Rob C makes a nice point here. Sorry, I have to bring this up, Rob. Since I can't donate in here, I suppose I'll find you on Patreon then. You don't need to post this on the stream. Haha, well, I did. Listen, all of the channels, I think, with very few exceptions, have Patreon as their sole source. Maybe not their sole source, but their main source of funding. That's how this exists in the modern era. I think it must be quite refreshing for people like Alex Bruce that he doesn't need to pay marketing agencies to do the evangelism on his behalf, because the community pays independent voices like us to seek out where the good stuff is coming from, and we can do it for them. That leaves them free to just focus on making the absolute best product they can possibly make. It's a very modern model, isn't it, Alex, that funding?
It is. I think it's fantastic. I think, I said it in the main broadcast about how we've all been immersed in this virtual world quite suddenly. I mean, I think it accelerated far quicker than it would have done if it hadn't been for the pandemic. And, Ralphie's been in his bothy for a number of years, improving his broadband steadily. But Roy, you appeared with your VPub fairly recently, and it just shows how quickly this is moving. And to have a commercial availability for it is fantastic. And I can't really say a huge amount about other award ceremonies. I think it would be inappropriate, but I would always have a keen eye on exactly what something is costing us, not necessarily because of the physical money, but because of what that is actually paying for. I think if I left it there as a sort of question, and it's just very, it's very nice to see a natural way like this.
Well, Jenny's made a good point there to say, oi, and I know that she's kidding because we've talked about this. You're talking me out of a job. What's interesting there, Jenny, is actually we are making your job probably a lot more fun potentially, giving you a different way to kind of approach things and a different way to get your message out there and things. If you're willing to be open and transparent and say the words, it's going to be very, very easy for you to engage with us and a willing, hungry community out there that unfortunately, for whatever reason, up until very recently, and Alex made a good point about the pandemic, has kind of struggled and had difficulty grappling with this maverick, upstart kind of enthusiast community that's building out there, these creators that, these people that set themselves up with a webcam and a microphone and suddenly have an expert opinion to share. And then the penny is slowly dropping through the pandemic that's not what's happening. We are just an enthusiast, the same as everybody that's drinking the whiskey out there. The difference is that we're one of the enthusiasts who are willing to sit in front of a microphone or a camera, and that's not everyone. So, the idea of us replacing a marketing agency or a marketing position in a job, that's never going to be the case. But there will be ways in order to open up the dialogue and use those routes in order to get access and to work things out and to figure out where there's synergy. And when we figure out where there's synergy, we can make great content that the hungry enthusiast community out there will lap up and very much enjoy. I can't use a better example, Alex, than the recent live stream from Ardnamurchan. Technical difficulties aside, of course.
You actually, your timing was perfect tonight. If you hadn't been 5 minutes slower than you were, or later than you were, there was some neighbours' firework display going off just outside my window. Yeah. And I had that vision of what happened with the stills up in Ardnamurchan when they were contracting rather loudly behind us.
That's right, the banging of the stills. I had the exact same fireworks happening here, but hopefully they were far enough away that nobody heard too much of it in the background. I think that, again, sorry to lean on you. Was anybody, I'm kind of focusing this on you, but I can put the question out to anybody. Was anybody surprised by any of the dynamics that we shared tonight? Because Ralphie and I are doing this bit by bit, day by day, and uncovering this data, and genuinely surprised by a lot of these results. Were you surprised by the results, or were you surprised by the way that they were presented or put together? I know that I'm speaking to contributors. You guys kind of had an insider look, but you weren't sure what we were doing with it, Andy?
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting concept anyway, because the way it's been done, and obviously it's the first time it's been done in this way. We're not in a big hall with 50 people tasting 50 samples or anything like that. So I think from my point of view, it's quite interesting to see some of the nominations within the contributor side of things, because it sort of highlighted potentially the difference, a bit like what we were saying before about distribution and stuff. There were things in there that I wouldn't really have thought was still available. Flaming Heart, I can't remember the last time I saw a Flaming Heart on the shelf, for example. And also,
it is still available. It is.
Well, there you go. I'm just looking in the wrong places. But I think
at least 2 of our ethical retailers has it on the shelf. I was hovering over the purchase button, but it's quite an expensive product. But because of the people and the community and the peer creators we're talking about here, evangelizing about this thing, I was tempted to buy it. And Andy, maybe you and I should do a bottle split. What do you think?
I'm game for that. Let's do it, mate. Absolutely.
60 quid each. There you go. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's fine. I think the only other thing that stood out that I was quite surprised at, but maybe you guys weren't. I don't know, maybe you were expecting this, but the amount of people passing on the vote in certain categories, which is fine. I'm just kind of like, because I think the one that I announced had the largest passing on there, but there's still some in there as well that I guess people might not been maybe exposed to yet. But I don't know what you guys might think that is possibly.
Well, I think there's a couple of things at play there. Jim's talked about it. We've all talked about it. People weren't really sure how these OSWAs were functioning. There was instruction there to try and encourage them what to do, but they still didn't fully get it or trust it. So they just kind of went with kind of winging it the way that they best. And next year, I think it's going to change. Falsgraph in the chat has already been talking exactly like that. I'm going to do this differently next year. I didn't understand that we could do this or that. And that's certainly part of it. The people that are skipping the vote, that certainly would have come into play. But even if we reduce that skip vote thing next year, we are still going to see the same categories, I predict, passed by. Grain, if it's not malt, you're going to see people going, oh, really, I don't touch that, and passing it. If it's blended, passing it. If it's a new distillery, I've not had any distribution near me yet. I haven't tried any of these distilleries, passing it. It was really, really important that Ralphie and I did not crowbar or force the dialogue on any of these things. People could pass. Everything was optional. You could sign in with your Google account and sign out again without leaving a single vote. Honestly. Now, there wasn't much value in that, but you could have a look under the hood and at least see what was going on and have an opinion about it. But really, we don't mind. We're going to publish all the figures, warts and all. We're going to share exactly how many people registered, how many votes they cast. And if that means exposing how many votes were skipped, I think that's a vital part of the whole mechanic, because it shows people that who actually voted is probably going to raise the quality of their vote. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's a developing concept as well, isn't it? It's, like this time next year when the second one comes around. Yeah.
Well, that's you offering to come up and help me put it together, Andy, isn't it? Because I'm a wee bit threadbare, if I'm honest. Ralphie's a wee bit exhausted. He's a wee bit tired of hearing me drone on about these things as well. But hopefully, by the time the springtime rolls around and we kick off next year, we'll be
the worst
thing.
Yeah, the worst thing we could have done was to create a whiskey awards based on existing models, because frankly, it wouldn't be worth anything because it's already been done. But understanding the internet and the dynamics of it as we do, the transparency of it, and the engagement, the quality of dispassionate engagement, unconditional engagement, and particularly with the wild card, the people's choice, by just dropping it in there, has really kind of energized it and given it validity. And I'm really curious to see what the OSWAs will look like in 5 years' time. It'll be very different, actually.
Yeah.
And I think not so much in content, but in audience.
Aye, it's going to be interesting to see how things develop. I think that as people understand it more and more, maybe they'll get engaged with it more and more. But at the same time, maybe it'll exclude some people that maybe considered it was just a kind of traditional awards category. What I do hope that we achieve is that whoever participates in it, we can kind of make sure it's the people that are impassioned and invested and understand what we're trying to do, and obviously make the relevance of it. By the way, not to everything. It can't be everything to all men or all women or whatever. It can only speak to our corner, our community of the whiskey verse, right? Whiskey's a much bigger category than us. You know, the people that take whiskey online, it shrinks it down. The people that take it into YouTube shrinks it down. The people that watch any one of our individual channels, by the time we're at that granular level, it's a sliver, right? It's all very, very small. And we tend to find our groove, and we find something that's our comfort zone. And if we try to encompass everything, we find it very difficult and confusing. So yeah, let's have dabble and dalliances, and let's step out of our comfort zone from time to time. But we tend to find things that we're better at, and I think that we pitched it right by focusing on it from a Scotch whiskey perspective. Because, Scott, do you predict that the bourbon community in the States, which is blowing up on YouTube, am I right, might be interested in doing something like this in bourbon? What do you think?
Ralphie thanked you earlier. He said all these kind of little bits and pieces came together, and that you was responsible for a lot of that. And I can attest that nothing happens without Roy's prior planning. Roy will overplan macaroni and cheese. So.
Not true.
No, not true. Yeah, I'd like to see it with the bourbon community, and I agreed. You know, when you contacted me early on, and you were trying to keep it, you know, really Scotch centric, I agreed. I really think bourbon needs its own category, its own awards. So hopefully, you know, I would think Chad and Sarah, they would come to mind as probably being the ones to head something up, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, they've got their own thing going on just now. They've got their own kind of It's Bourbon Nights Awards, and they really do put on a really good show for that. I mean, those guys are just doing an amazing presentation, and they're just great, the two of them. But it's kind of their perspective, their technical capabilities, their understanding how to manage the tools and the things. You're absolutely right. I think that's a good shout for it. But the bourbon community in the States is screaming out for that. The community is absolutely huge. That's the biggest community that could maybe do something similar.
Yeah. There was a few questions, Roy, just kind of about the categories. So people were wondering if the categories are going to stay the same, if there's going to be the same number of categories. And then there was a few mentions about like best sherry, best peat, or like a premium category. So just, I mean, obviously this one just finished, so I'm sure that you guys will talk more about that later, but everybody's curious. So
well, Ralphie and I have a plan to have a contributor roundtable event thing, something like this that's not public, cool. Where we all get together and we say, yeah, you got this right, but I think we should adapt this. And then Ralph and I will go away and ignore absolutely everything and just do it our own way anyway. No, but seriously, I mean, there is going to be that kind of thing happening where we really need to, just the same as we listen to all the critical comments or the constructive criticism or whatever that comes in from the community, the exact same from the people who were involved in shaping it, the people that were involved in creating the nominations and things in the first place, the people who are trusting us with their brand that they're building, to call them a collaborator, right? We need to sit down with them and understand, did they get it? Did they understand what we were doing? And then we will. But Ralphie, I can tell Ralphie's not chuck everything out and do it new from scratch again. I think you've probably picked up on him over
It went
the
so
years.
well this time that that would be silly, right?
Well, I think he's going to always go kind of for it's baby steps.
Yeah.
I mean, he was he was vehement. He said, look, if you promote it in your channel, that's fine, and I'll do it in my channel. But we're not going to go out and we're not going to ask people and scunner people, to use a Glaswegian word. We're not going to make people fed up with us saying, please promote this, please promote this. We're going to just let it do its own thing, do it quietly, and see how it pans out. Because we might end up with kinks and wrinkles that might be difficult for us. So the bigger we make it, the harder that is then to overcome. So I think I'm going to throw this to you, Ralphie. Do you see this being a kind of evolution and refinement rather than revolution and reinvention?
It's going to be a soft evolution of a formula which we now know from this evening works. The important thing with 8 categories is that it comfortably fills 3 hours, and we don't want to be we do not want to be overextending the novelty of people's patience with them getting numb bottoms as year after year we extend the categories to include this, that, and the rest of it. That we will always have people who are going to pitch in with suggestions, but ultimately we need to contain it. We need to shorthand it to give the best sweep of the what we are interested in and what we are connecting with between the onliners, the buyers, the community that we understand and connect with, and the whiskey industry. And one thing that I'm very curious to see, and I'm already slightly aware of it, is that there is increasingly a conversation going on amongst small distilleries who have tuned in to spectate the OSWAs, that they maybe have not reached the nominations or won in within the categories, but they understand the value and the relevance of it. And I think that over the next couple of years, we'll see the larger companies as the market morphs, particularly with a significant global recession coming round the corner, which is most definitely on its way. And things will become more, the wriggle room for distilleries in the market is going to get tighter collectively, internationally. And I think that this actually really creates more of a responsibility for everybody who's engaged in a platform like this, an awards scheme, or really just as an online commentator doing our own things individually, to always be bearing that in mind, that we're here to support an industry, that we will criticize now and again, but we'll never be spiteful about it or mean about it, because it's, as much as the industry looks after its business, we're looking after our business as well as commentators, contributors, and we all, our experience is greatly enriched by the circumstances that we're in, having an audience and building an audience and saying, right, where do I go next? You know, particularly interesting is American bourbon. You look at Iron Root, for example, the world's best bourbon. There's a little distillery come out of absolutely nowhere in a very short space of time. What is their secret sauce? Simples. They bypassed the traditional consultancy model and they connected directly with the online community and have hugely benefited from the ambient expertise that exists within the online interactive US bourbon community. And it will extend new flavors, new varieties, new corn varieties, rediscovering old corn varieties, taking Balcones and doing things a little bit different in Nevada, in New Mexico, for example. Very exciting. I mean, I don't want to be hogging this, guys, but I'm getting a little bit sentimental from when Stranicans first appeared from Colorado. To open a bottle of that and pour a wee dram, it was a revelation. It's rather like what's happening with Irish whiskey now. You're saying, hang about, wait a minute. This is a whole new flavour and its quality. The diversity and the spread is amazing. And this is a challenge for Scotch whiskey.
It's interesting when you talk about Iron Root as well. I mean, you're absolutely right, Ralphie. I mean, they also incidentally made absolutely fantastic spirit as well. It's amazing to drink. But their latest route to market is a collaboration with a YouTuber. Quite incredible. More on that in an upcoming VPub. No spoilers. There's going to be a whole Thursday's VPub will be all about that. It's quite a fascinating thing. And it's interesting as you talked about the idea that sometimes as well we may be prone to criticize a wee bit. And I think that's okay. Although I don't know if remorse is the right word or regret, but I have recently slipped into a few rants because I do get a wee bit frustrated about certain things that are happening. And I have to remember that, you know, it's only whiskey at the end of the day. It's just whiskey. But whiskey is very, very emotive. Whiskey is very good at reaching into you and finding out where your passion points are and pressing all the wee buttons and getting you riled up. And I think it's okay for us to step out of our kind of diplomacy. I know you see me as being a bit of a diplomat recently. You'll be disappointed, Ralphie, that I'll let the cloak drop in recent VPubs. Sheila called them Roy Rants. We love them, right? But I think it's what we want to do is, at least if we get things wrong, or if we overstep the rant mark, at least still have a place where we can invite debate or somebody to step up and say, Roy, that's interesting to hear your points there, but have you considered it from this perspective? And that's really, really nice when that happens, because you think, oh, wow, well, actually, no, I didn't think about that. Now that I weave that into it, it's going to temper things a wee bit. But still, you know, and you continue. So, I mean, I think I hope that we can be forgiven for ranting occasionally.
Yeah.
Alex,
At the same time, Roy, we're not apologising when we call out any disingenuous, misdirectional flannel from an industry where occasionally we get patronised.
And I think sometimes it's not enough to just say, in my opinion. I think sometimes you have to have that well-informed way of shaping that opinion. It's not a disclaimer just to say, oh, I have this opinion. It has to be with reason. So while we are kind of enthusiasts and just kind of hobbyists and things, doing most of the things from home, there is a responsibility that comes with that. And you only need to look at the scale of what we've been enjoying. There are still 52 people sitting in the last live stream that's been shut down, watching live. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're watching. It's just an end stream.
Taking notes, by the way.
But I want to put a wee message to say, hey guys, there's an after party. You should come in and watch this stream. But even this after party, which wasn't advertised or whatever, I mean, I don't know how many of us there are in. There's 139 of us. It's just so if we are going to be loose with our words, they need to be from a well-formed perspective, I think. That is my point there. Alex, do you think that what we do, and remember, every one of us that you're looking at here, including Ralph in his bothy, he's been doing it for 12 years, Scott in his basement, me in my spare room, Andy in his spare room, Sheila in, I can't imagine, it's probably some exotic spot in Mexico, and Jim in his spare room. Do you see that we are a wee bit kind of a jaggedy thing to handle? We could be a wee bit volatile or a bit maverick. Is it difficult for you? Or perhaps if you look at the perspective from a traditional producer, you could probably see that it might be difficult, right?
Yes and no. I mean, I think I was listening to a few comments earlier. It wasn't that long ago, you'd walk up the high street here in the UK and you'd be stopped and there'd be someone there standing there with 3 different things in what looked like the same packaging. And they would say, try this, try this, try this. Which one do you prefer? And then you'd be amazed that it wasn't the Coca-Cola, it was actually the own brand, or you know what I'm getting at.
Yes.
That was the traditional way of spending money on feedback. Now, combination of lots of different things. I mean, there are more small people like us right across the world now making whiskey or similar product who don't have that resource to go out and stand in the streets or pay people to stand in the streets and say which one do you prefer. So what we get from this, and by this I mean everyone who's involved, is feedback. It may be not what we want to hear, but then it's up to us to go away and go, well, actually, should we take that on board? So it's fantastic because not only do we get it from everywhere around the world, but it's free. And it's up to us to be engaged. And if we want to be engaged and take it on board, then fantastic. We may not take everything on board. It may be impossible to. But I think it's a really good medium for the producer to listen to.
Hey, let me ask a question real quick, if you don't mind, for the panel. 8 years ago, Bart and I started doing reviews, and the consensus then in the whiskey community was, from the distillers, 99% of whiskey is made for mass consumption. The 40% ABVs, color added, whatnot. And only a very small fraction, maybe 1%, was made for whiskey enthusiasts. Do you think that's changed over the last few years? Are they making more for the enthusiasts? Have they actually been listening to that? Or are we kind of still stuck with the same amount of whiskey that's coming out for us whiskey lovers?
Is that directed to Alex, Scott?
Yeah, anybody with the insider information. Yeah. I mean, have things changed? Well,
let me show you an example of change, Scott. Okay, here is a producer that was not mentioned tonight in the context of Scotch whisky production. Okay, and they own some of the crown jewels of Scotch whisky distilleries. They were mentioned through their Irish their single pot still Irish production, but they weren't mentioned in the context of Scotch at all, which is a huge takeaway, honestly. But there is opportunity for them to change, and they may try a wee toe in the water now and again. There's something that came out recently from Glenlivet, a 12-year-old illicit still, and this is their follow-up product. This is Glenlivet licensed dram. Now, I've not opened this one yet, but I've spent a lot of time with the illicit still, and it's a huge step up. Suddenly, it's a Glenlivet that you can actually taste as an enthusiast. 48% ABV. We guess this at 48% as well. We guess that it's probably they've taken the opportunity to non-chill filter it. I don't know that for sure. And they've hopefully put it out in natural colour. I don't know that for sure. Because of the different presentation of this whiskey, we're encouraged to think that it's a more natural thing. I hope that is an indicator of that change. If I walk into the Good Spirits Company or if I browse online, I have never been so spoilt for choice, even during the pandemic when a lot of the whiskies that a lot of us were chasing were not available. There were still hundreds of bottles of whiskey to choose from on the shelf. There has never been a time where we have been catered for better than we are today in 2021. That's my take on it. If anybody else wants to chime in or change, please take the floor. Absolutely.
I'm definitely not as knowledgeable as Alex, but just wanted to say I feel like maybe the percentages haven't changed or they haven't changed that much, but I just think in terms of like new distilleries, if you kind of look at what almost every new distillery is doing, they're putting out something around 46% non-colored, non-chill filtered, probably because they have to. I mean, a lot of it is because they want to as well, but to kind of survive in a huge market of other whiskeys, I think they are kind of having to change to kind of get help from enthusiasts like us. So, which I think is great. That was all I wanted to say on that.
I think it's not just the new distillers. It's if you look at guys like Michael Henry through Loch Lomond, and I know you're a big fan of Loch Lomond, Sheila. So,
yeah.
Guys like Michael having spoken to Michael, is an enthusiast himself. So he's starting to take a look at the production that Loch Lomond and Glen Scotia are doing from an enthusiast point of view and saying that's, I think he narrowed down what Loch Lomond was putting out simply because, well, he didn't do it personally. I mean, he didn't have the final say, but he certainly had a big play in banging out, you know, all these different bottlings and saying, let's narrow it down and make the production better rather than having umpteen different bottles with different finishes on them to the point where there's near a Loch Lomond finish at all anymore. You know, they're just down to aged bottlings. And I think this is where, you know, it proved itself earlier with the likes of Springbank winning the best distiller. That was us speaking. That to me was a prime example of the enthusiast speaking.
Yep.
So, you know, it's I think it's moving forward even with the older producers, as well as the new producers.
There was a time that all of Springbank's output went to contract for blends. There was a reason that you can't buy a lot of 60s and 70s Springbank, right? Because it all ended up in blends and things. And I think that the Springbank, I don't know of any Springbank that goes outside of Springbank. I don't think it does. And I think that they have built a success on the back of that growing demand for that very, very natural product. I love the fact that things like Loch Lomond is starting to move baby steps, little by little, towards more natural presentation. That's really encouraging. Between Ian down at Glen Scotia and Campbelltown and Michael Henry up in at Loch Lomond, the two of them together, have you seen the renaissance at Glen Scotia? Ralphie's talked about it. Everybody's talking about Glen Scotia. Now, there may be a lot to do with the fact that we can't buy our Springbanks and our Glengaels. Oh, there's this other distillery, and you try it and you go, oh my God, I've been ignoring this all this time. You know, I had a lot of tourists recently visited Campbelltown, and they went to say, oh, the Glengael and Springbank. Oh, and there's this other distillery, Glen Scotia. And they left thinking, Glen Scotia, Glen Scotia, Glen Scotia. Oh, and there were those other distilleries, Springbank and Glengael. Now, that's not to say that they enjoyed one more than the other. It was just such a surprise that Glen Scotia is now bringing a product that everybody can embrace for the most part. Baby steps, it's getting there slowly but surely. I think that it's different. You don't want, because you get disappointed by the things that's been happened at Glendronach. There are some decisions that happen there that make you think, why is that happening? Why is that's against the zeitgeist? But we don't see it from that angle. They see it from international global markets, demands and pressures put on them by the agents and the distributors in that market, and it's very, very different. But I guarantee you that there are no, who was it that was asking about natural presentation? Sheila was talking about new distilleries doing that because they feel like they maybe have to get the enthusiasts on board. Well, I don't think there's any whiskey makers out there that want to see their product loaded with caramel and demineralized water, put to 40%, shoved through, force fed through a filter. That's not what any whiskey maker wants to see happen to their whiskey. I guarantee you.
Yeah.
None of them. Some of them have to witness that because of the nature of economics. I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, Alex. I was trying to keep a left eye on an eyebrow going up or down there. But can I just say I feel really sorry for Alex Bruce because he's the only guy from the industry.
I tuned in thinking there'd be masses, and that no. Look, I'd just like to say everything that has just been said is absolutely bang on in terms of. Well, put it this way, if we look at it from the other way around, if it wasn't for enthusiasts, there wouldn't be all these new distilleries. Simple as that. If you look at Arran, although that was potentially pre-real enthusiast when they kicked off, but then you had Kilhome and Daft Mill, you know, mid-2000, first decade. They would not have happened if it wasn't for people going, hang on, we want something better. And it's all about this ladder. You start off potentially with your blend or whatever it's going to be in that category, and you go, oh, what's next? And you keep moving up until you get to somewhere you're really comfortable with, and then you look for a spread of opportunity and difference. And that is where the new distillers certainly are hoping to be in that bit. And because of that, some of the other guys who've been around for a lot longer are suddenly going, well, hang on, we need to be in that party too. And the fact is that the enthusiasts have driven it. So we're all very happy.
Would you agree? I sometimes have to say on the channel, Alex, that the reason that Macallan is a success today is because back in the 70s, if you knew, and you drank Macallan. That was a very small, nothing was being exported out of the UK back then. But they've since been built into being an international luxury brand. The Enthusiast drove that. I think Springbank is a product of the Enthusiast.
But just on Macallan, sorry, Roy, to butt in there, but on Macallan, you've got to remember that in 1979 or 1980, when they launched internationally for the first time, I think from memory, they chose Taiwan. I think was their market of experiment, if you like. Their marketing budget for the year in Taiwan in 1979 was £500. And that just puts it into perspective.
Yeah, I heard that they had a £50 budget that was spent on the Times crossword at one point, something ridiculous like that. But it's true. I mean, they didn't have enthusiasts out there willing to do what we are doing today on that kind of scale. But the reason that they were held in high regard was word of mouth through people drinking it for its experience and its quality and its flavour, rather than anything that was slapped on the label, or any of the boxing or packaging or whatever it's gone through over the years. I think, and summary, and I'm appreciative of your time and everything. We've gone over an hour with this after party. We'll kind of start to lead towards wrapping it up, but as much as fun as I'm having, honestly. But I think that, do we sit here today and look at the variation, look at the quality, look at the way things are going? Do we feel genuinely full of optimism from the perspective of an enthusiast, a drinker, not somebody who's collecting for investment, not somebody who's drinking a single brand and replacing it a bottle at a time, whatever your bottle of choice is, but somebody that's promiscuous and a drinker? Do we feel, with all these dynamics that we've talked about, do we feel optimistic about the future of whiskey? I'll put it to Scott first over there and how he sees it in Kansas. Are you optimistic, Scott? Well, you're muted.
Yep,
yeah.
I have myself muted. Sorry about that. Yeah, definitely. 8 years ago, Bart and I thought, once we've reviewed 100 whiskeys, we're going to be out of whiskeys to review because we will have reviewed them all. And we're up over 800 reviews that we've done now, approaching 900, and I can still go into any liquor store and find something that we haven't reviewed. So I like the items that are coming out. I think it's good. I think the bourbon. I think there's going to be a transition from some of these bourbon drinkers in the States as well. The bourbon market is going to it already is saturated. And I think people are going to start reaching out. They're going to try some of these scotches, some of these Irish whiskeys to see what they're about. And I think you're going to see an influx there from the States at least. But we'll see.
Are you optimistic, Jim Ingram?
I think it's a never-ending story, to be honest with you. It's one of these things that I still.
But is that a positive thing? Or?
Oh yeah. Oh no, in a positive way. I mean, I'm still sitting in the local British Legion with my dad, drinking a pint of Guinness and drinking a famous grouse, and loving it. While that goes on, sure. I mean, it doesn't matter what you drink. I still think that this is what will keep whiskey alive. If this sort of feel and community and love of it is alive, then whiskey will never die. It's like denim. It'll just always be around. And, while it's around, people will love it.
I'm wearing denim right now. On any given day, there's a good chance I'm wearing denim. Sheila, you're coming at this from a different perspective. You're in your early 20s, I think. Forgive me for mentioning it, but you're that kind of youthful aspect coming into this thing, crazy, manic, impassioned about it, studying like crazy. Is it difficult for you to grasp that this is not the way it's always been?
Yeah, I think, I do research for videos and you kind of see how it's evolved over time. I've only been at this for, a little while, but just seeing those past, even 100 years, how different things have how different they are now, I guess. And I only have, probably 100 bottles. I think I'm the smallest collection out of all of you guys, But I think the community is, and I know maybe we're not necessarily talking about the community. I think whiskey in general is going to kind of trend the way that the community is kind of pushing for. At least that's my hope. But I think the community is almost better than the whiskey, or at least better than the whiskey. So I don't know. I'm happy to be a part of this community for sure.
Well, if I would agree with that. If we can take anything from the positivity and the optimism and the passion from the community, if that bleeds its way into whiskey production in general, we're in definitely good shape. What about you, Andy? What would you say? You've brought the channel back to life. You've been back to life now for what, a year and a half now? You've been doing it for its second wind, I suppose. I spoke to you about English whiskey recently, and you were over the moon about the experience, not just the fact that it existed. That was the first thing, that it could even exist again, but the fact that the quality was just so exciting. And you and I both agreed, like Ralphie was talking about with Stranahans, and like Scott touched upon all these different flavors, we had both agreed that it was English malt whiskey, but it was not Scotch. It had its own thing. So you've got to be looking at it through that lens and thinking, the future's bright, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll be honest, naturally, I'm a pessimist. And I think...
Pessimism leads to disappointment.
Yeah. But I think when it comes to English whiskey, for me, that has been one of the categories that I've really got my teeth into, in particular in the last sort of 2 years. It's flourished. It's come from a standing start to, there's what now, 27-ish, I think, distilleries, and producing whiskey in England at the minute. I could be wrong. But that in itself provides variety going down the road. That is people putting more production out. There's casks sat aside in warehouses that 4 years ago didn't exist. And, they paved their own way via the road that Scotch started. Everybody's always going to come back to Scotch no matter what you do. There's always going to be a comparison. That is the yardstick, and it always will be. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think for me, it is probably one of the categories that I'm most looking forward to seeing develop. I've obviously got a bit of vested interest in it being quite close to my heart anyway. But I mean, you just look at the nominations tonight. The Cotswolds were in there. That's fantastic. That's brilliant. It's more accessible than Bimba's releases, to be honest with you, which is great. They've hit that really nice sweet spot of having a core release available that's good value for money, and it's really, really good whiskey. It really is in its own right. I think I'm kind of whiskey as a whole. I'm cautiously optimistic. That's the pessimism coming back in. Cautiously optimistic, because I think that's
not being a pessimist. That's being a northerner, Andy.
Well, yeah, I'll take that. To be fair, yeah, exactly. But I think we've got to be mindful of the fact that we sometimes think whiskey enthusiasts, we are our own worst enemies. Sometimes we build these distilleries up, and we just basically all want it, and then suddenly it's all gone, and then we're like, where's it all gone? It's like, you've got it, you've drunk it. It's the stocks are running low now. But there's obviously, a lot of distilleries on the flip side that are kind of building up some resilience, like we heard from Aaron previously about the 10-year-old stock. And there's always going to be whiskies there that you can depend on and you can go back to. It's not all about chasing those limited releases all the time. You don't always have to be chasing the latest pop. Just because someone else has it, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Let's be honest, a limited release of 180 bottles doesn't make for good YouTube content, right?
I know, right? Exactly. I might get like 23, maybe 24 views if I give it to my mum to maybe watch. So yeah, it's absolutely. I think we do have to be mindful of what's kind of on the horizon. Ralphie, you already touched on the potential for the economy in the future. There's obviously been a lot of dabbling in whiskey with whiskey investors and things like that, which hasn't been particularly great. So I think it's staying grounded, but it's looking bright at the same time. Do you know what I mean? It's cloudy, but there's some sunshine later on. It's going to be all right.
Do you know what? From Andy, at Maltbox with his character and his outlook, I'll take that as blindingly positive for
There we go. There we go.
Right, that's how I interpret that.
More than half full.
Let's hand over to El Jefe, the gaffer, and for a final. What is the future, Ralphie? Can we look ahead? Can we be optimistic? I think if I was to go back and look at Ralphie videos from 8 or 10 years ago, I think maybe there's a wee bit more optimism in your language these days. Am I wrong?
Mm-hmm. As Andy mentioned briefly there's that little bit of sunshine, and I think we should notice the warmth in that sunshine, that for quality and for availability and for accessibility in terms of price and the caliber of presentation, the integrity of presentation, there is most certainly a lot of optimism. But the pandemic has been an absolute lens to the wider Scotch whisky industry, where blends have simply not been selling. And this situation, we tend to be looking at it through today's lens, but we can use yesterday's experience from today to project into the future. For part of the global spirits industry, there are serious challenges ahead. If you are on the shelves of supermarkets, generic presentation, fighting for that discount price to get the occasional consumer purchase, you've got challenges ahead, serious challenges. But for those distilleries, any distilleries who are investing in an accessible product delivered intelligently and accessibly to the informed, experienced customer, things are looking good. It's part of the bifurcation. There's always been this split that between those who buy for smell and taste and those who buy for brand-led label accessibility, recognition, etc., with loads of marketing. That is growing wider and wider. And I think it's very exciting as we sit here this evening, having witnessed the success, I'll call it a success, of the inaugural OSWAs. I think that in itself is highly significant. It is a stepping stone. We will see the OBAs, the Online Bourbon Awards. We will see the ORAs, Online Rum Awards. They are not that far away. We were the first. Great, all good. But we're in the right side of the railway lines here, and it will continue for all of us, whatever our engagement, whatever we're commenting about. We are going to have loads to talk about in the forthcoming few years. All good.
Fantastic. Listen, everybody, this after party idea was a last minute thing. It was that my wife said, there's an award ceremony? Oh, somebody dropped out there. Was it Andy? There's an award ceremony, and is there going to be an after party? And I was like, oh, I haven't even thought about such a thing. So maybe in future, but I think we would always like to have this kind of relaxed, easy discussion vibe about it, not an advertised thing, not something that's going to stay forefront in the channel. I hope that made sense to everybody. It meant that we were extremely limited with the amount of numbers that were in, but we still knocked on for nearly 200 joining in this after party, and you had to know where the link was in order to get here. So I appreciate everybody that's been trying to get in. There's one commentator in tonight called No Rolex, No Sex, and I've seen them in regularly over the last few weeks. But because of the name of the channel, of his handle, every single comment that goes up requires action from a moderator. You might want to consider changing your handle in order to not have to get your comments read a wee bit more, my friend. It's been nice to have you in, and it's been nice to have absolutely everybody in hanging out. Daniel Vermaas I already messaged Menno to say we missed a trick, Menno. We could have had an after party Menno quiz at the end. Daniel's shouting for it. It's a good idea, but maybe that'll be the refinement and the tweaks that Ralphie and I make to next year, adding a quiz at the end in the after party. Can I raise a wee glass of this the Springbank 18 that I've been enjoying so much? Can I first say well done to you, Alex, honestly, for being so open, for coming in and joining us here as well. and genuinely not being afraid of anything, any questions or whatever. You've always been very gracious with your time. I've enjoyed listening to you over the times that we've spent together, and I'm very glad to have had you in here tonight.
Thank you.
Shayla, you star, thank you so much for all your enthusiasm and just hanging out with us in general. Jim over in the Irish Sea, my friend Scott in Kansas, can't wait till we're together again, buddy. And Ralphie, for all your time, for everything. We've done okay, like you said. What did you say? No bad. It's no bad.
It's probably not bad. Thank you, Roy.
Which for a Glaswegian, that means he'll be hanging out the bunting.
Yeah, basically, yeah, probably.
Super. Listen, guys, I'll kill this stream now. It's been amazing. I'm going to go and sleep. And well, I can't. I've got a lock-in for patrons tomorrow night, but I'll sleep in. I'll get a wee lie-in tomorrow if the family permits me.
You're not going to close this out with Alleluia by Cousin Shane, Roy?
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, let me begin. Okay, that was too much of a belly laugh there, Scott Bruno. Fantastic. Oh, I wonder, though. I could have uploaded it because we've got it, haven't we? We've got the thing.
Yep.
I need to share that. I'll share it on the Barflies page. But listen, thank you, everybody. It's just been really, really nice to hang out with you afterwards as well. I'm going to go back. Do you want some stats? Let's see if we've not. I've closed it all down. I don't know how. Oh no, I haven't here. It's here. The number of the beast, 661 likes and 1 down thumb on it so far. Let's refresh it and see if we've attracted any more. Listen, I'll take that. 687 likes, only 1 down thumb. Still, the down thumb is a thing that we only have on YouTube. We need to appreciate it. 3,500 views. Ralphie, that's huge, huge engagement. It's I'm really pleased, and it seems like people are genuinely enjoying it as well. There's 18 comments. I hope that we'll all pitch in and help answering them, right? Because they'll build over the weekend. Thank you all.
Cheers, folks.
Thank you to everybody that's hung out with us till the very, very end. Thank you all. I'll see you very, very soon. Good night, everyone.
Slanjava.
Hi, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys.
Congratulations, Alex. And doing it sustainably as well.
Cheers.
Cheers.